The battlefield was loud with the sound of swords clashing and people shouting. Fire burned in the distance, and smoke filled the sky. Among the fighting soldiers, a young human warrior with dark brown hair moved quickly. His gray armor was scratched and dusty, but he kept fighting. He looked tired, but he didn't stop. He ducked under an enemy blade and swung his sword, pushing forward through the chaos. He didn't know where his friends were anymore. The enemy had surprised them, and everything had gone wrong. Suddenly, just as an enemy soldier charged at him from behind, a bright silver sword flashed. The enemy fell before he could land a blow. The human boy turned fast and saw her. She stood tall and calm, her blonde hair shining even through the dust and smoke. Her armor was different, more elegant and light, but it was still strong. It looked like something out of a story. Her eyes didn't show fear. She held her sword with confidence, and she was already moving toward another enemy without a word. He stared for a second, unsure if she was real. She fought with such grace, almost like she was dancing, but every move was deadly. "You're welcome," she said simply as she passed him, not even looking back. He blinked, then quickly followed her. He didn't know who she was, but she had just saved his life. And right now, staying close to her seemed like a good idea. They fought together without speaking much. She was fast, and he was strong. Her sword moved like wind, his hit like thunder. They covered each other without needing to ask. Even though they had just met, it felt like they had trained together for years. After the last wave of enemies pulled back, there was a strange silence. The human boy leaned against a broken wall to catch his breath. The girl walked over, wiping her sword on a cloth she pulled from her belt. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice rough. "Princess Aelira of the Elven realm," she said quietly. "But not today. Today, I am only a fighter." He stared at her. He had heard of elves, of course, but he never thought he'd meet one, especially not in the middle of a human war. "I'm Kieran," he said. "Just a soldier." She looked at him for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you, Kieran." "For what?" he asked, confused. "For not looking at me like I don't belong here," she replied. Then she turned and began to walk away. Without thinking, Kieran stepped forward. "Wait, are you staying with the army?" "No," she said. "I was only passing through. But now," she looked back over the field. "Now, maybe I need to stay longer." Kieran didn't know what that meant. 2 days had passed, but something told him this wasn't the last time. The human camp was quiet now, side by side, filled with the sounds of tired men resting and wounded soldiers being treated. Tents stood in rows, and fires crackled as food cooked. Kieran sat on a wooden crate near the edge of the camp, sharpening his sword. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Princess Aelira. He still couldn't believe that an elf, a royal no less, had fought beside him like a true warrior. He hadn't seen her since that day. She had disappeared after the battle, just as quietly as she had arrived. As he worked on his sword, a shadow fell across the ground in front of him. He looked up, and there she was. Aelira. Her armor was cleaner now, and her blonde hair was tied back neatly. She looked calm, as if the fight had never happened. But her eyes were sharp, focused. "You stayed," Kieran said, surprised. She gave a small nod. "I did." "Why?" "Because something is wrong here," she said. "That attack wasn't random. Someone wanted both our people to suffer." Kieran frowned. "You think someone planned it?" "Yes," she said. "And it wasn't just a human problem or an elf problem. It was meant to keep us divided." Kieran looked around the camp. "Well, if you're here to help, you'll have a hard time. Most soldiers here don't trust elves." "I noticed," Aelira said with a small smile. "But I didn't come here to win their trust. I came to find the truth." They sat in silence for a moment. Kieran could feel something building in the air, like the start of something bigger than both of them. "I heard the general talking earlier," he said quietly. "He said there were signs of dark magic, something old, something dangerous." Aelira's face grew serious. Then we don't have much time." Just then, a shout came from the edge of the camp. Soldiers were rushing to the gate. Kieran and Elira stood quickly and followed. A scout had returned, bloodied and pale. He dropped to his knees and looked up at the general. "We found a village, burned. Nothing left. No tracks, no survivors," he gasped. Elira stepped forward. "Any signs of magic?" The scout looked at her with fear in his eyes, then slowly nodded. "Yes, black flames that never went out." They whispered. Everyone fell silent. Kieran glanced at Elira. "What does that mean?" "It means this is only the beginning," she said, "and we can't face it alone." Kieran didn't know much about magic or elves, but he knew one thing. He trusted her. She had saved his life, fought beside him, and now she was risking everything to help his people. "Then let's not waste time," he said. "Where do we start?" Elira looked into the darkening sky. "We start by going to the ruins. The answers are there. But be ready, Kieran. Once we go, there's no turning back." The next morning, Kieran and Elira left the camp before sunrise. The air was cold, and a light mist covered the ground. They walked in silence for a while. The only sound was the crunch of dirt under their boots. Both of them knew this journey wouldn't be easy. Elira led the way, her sword strapped to her back. She moved with quiet grace, her eyes watching everything. Kieran followed close behind, his hand always near the hilt of his sword. He wasn't used to traveling with elves, but something about her made him feel calm. Maybe it was her focus. Maybe it was the way she made the forest feel less dangerous. "The ruins are deep in the Whispering Woods," Elira said. "Few humans have ever gone there. Even most elves stay away now." "Why?" Kieran asked. "Because the magic there is old, wild. It changes things," she answered. Kieran didn't like the sound of that, but he nodded. They had already faced death once together. He trusted her. As they walked deeper into the forest, the trees grew taller and closer. Strange shapes twisted in the bark. Shadows moved even when the wind was still. Kieran felt a chill run through him. "Stay close to me," Elira warned. "The woods will try to confuse you." After an hour, they reached a broken stone path. Moss covered most of it, but the shape of the road was still clear. Old carvings lined the edges, symbols Kieran didn't understand. "We're getting close," Elira said. They walked another mile before the ruins came into view. Tall stone pillars stood like skeletons, broken and leaning. The ground was cracked, and vines wrapped around everything. In the center was a wide circle of stone, blackened by what looked like fire. Kieran stepped forward slowly. "What happened here?" "A battle," Elira said softly. "Hundreds of years ago, elves and humans stood together to fight something dark. We won, but the magic never left." As they moved into the center of the ruins, the air grew heavy. Kieran felt it pressing on his chest. Elira knelt near the blackened stone and placed her hand on it. "This is where the magic came from," she whispered, "and it's waking up again." Suddenly, a loud sound echoed through the trees, like a whisper carried on the wind, but too many voices at once. Kieran pulled out his sword, eyes scanning the forest. Elira stood slowly. Her face was pale. "We're not alone," she said. From the shadows, dark shapes began to form, twisted creatures with no eyes, made of smoke and bone. They moved like shadows, fast and silent. Kieran stepped beside her. "What are they?" "Remnants of the old war," she said. "They were sealed here, but someone broke the seal." The creatures moved closer. "Ready?" Kieran asked, tightening his grip. Elira nodded, raising her sword. "Always," she said. And then the fight began. Kieran moved fast, his sword flashing in the dim light. The first creature came at him like a shadow with claws. He swung hard, and the blade cut through it. The shadow let out a sharp hiss before it vanished into smoke, but more were coming. Elira stood back to back with him, her movements quick and sharp. Her sword glowed with a soft blue light. Every time she struck, the creature screamed and pulled away. Her magic was strong here, even though the dark power tried to fight back. "Don't let them surround us," she shouted. Kieran nodded and turned, blocking a strike aimed at her. He kicked one creature away and slashed another. He had fought many battles, but never against something like this. They didn't bleed. They didn't fall like normal enemies. It took more than strength to beat them. It took focus and trust. Elira moved like a dancer, spinning and striking with grace. She whispered ancient words as she fought, and her blade burned brighter. She wasn't just a warrior. She was a protector of old magic, and this place knew her. Suddenly, one of the creatures broke through their line. It rushed at Kieran, faster than the others. Before he could raise his sword, Elira stepped in front of him and drove her blade through its chest. It screamed, a horrible sound that made the air shake. "You're hurt," she said, seeing the blood on his arm. "Just a scratch," Kieran said, trying to sound calm. He wasn't used to being protected, but she didn't treat him like he was weak, only like he mattered. After what felt like hours, the last of the shadows faded away. The ruins fell silent again. Kieran dropped to one knee, breathing hard. Elira stood still for a moment, her sword pointed to the ground. "Are they gone?" he asked. "For now," she said, "but they'll return. The seal is broken. This place is no longer safe." "Who would do this?" Kieran asked, wiping sweat from his brow. "Someone who wants war," she answered. "Someone who wants elves and humans to fear each other again." Kieran looked around the ruins. The stone circle now pulsed faintly with dark light. Whatever had been sealed here was not just old, it was angry. "Then we need to warn both sides," he said. "We need to make them listen." Elira looked at him, eyes softening. "They won't trust me." "They don't trust me either," Kieran said with a small smile. "But maybe they'll listen to both of us." She gave a slow nod. "Then we go together." As they left the ruins, walking side by side, neither of them spoke, but the silence between them felt strong, not empty. They knew what was coming would be harder than any battle, but they also knew they wouldn't face it alone. Kieran and Elira moved quickly through the forest. The shadows behind them felt heavier now, like something was watching. The wind carried strange whispers, and even the birds had stopped singing. "They know we've seen the ruins," Elira said. "Whoever broke the seal will try to stop us." "Let them try," Kieran replied, gripping his sword tighter. By the time they reached the edge of the human camp, night was falling. Torches lit the path, and soldiers stood at the gates. When the guards saw Elira, they raised their weapons. "An elf? She's not allowed here," one of them shouted. "She's with me," Kieran said firmly. "Stand down." The guards hesitated but lowered their blades. They had seen Kieran fight, and most knew better than to argue with him. Still, their eyes stayed cold as they watched Elira walk past. Inside the camp, whispers followed them. Some soldiers stared with fear, others with anger. The wounds of old wars ran deep, and not everyone wanted peace between humans and elves. They went straight to the command tent. Inside, the human general sat with maps spread out before him. He looked up, frowning when he saw Elira. "What is this, Kieran? Bringing an elf into my camp without permission?" "She's not just an elf," Kieran said. "She saved my life, and we found something in the ruins, something dangerous." Elira stepped forward. "Dark magic has returned. The seal is broken. Your villages aren't being attacked by beasts. They're being hunted by ancient shadows." The general stood slowly. "You expect me to believe that?" "I saw it," Kieran said. "We both did. If we don't act now, more people will die." The general looked between them. He didn't trust Elira. That was clear. But he trusted Kieran, and that trust made him pause. "We need proof," he said finally. "Something solid. If I go to the king with nothing but stories, I'll be called a fool." "Then let me speak to the king myself," Elira said. The tent fell silent. "Absolutely not," the general said. "An elf in the human court. You'd be arrested on sight." Kieran stepped forward. "Then I'll go with her. Protect her." "That makes it worse," the general snapped. "You'll be seen as a traitor." "So what?" Kieran asked. "We're already at war with something none of you understand. If we wait, we'll lose more than just pride." The general rubbed his forehead, thinking hard. Finally, he sighed. "Fine, but don't come crying to me when the gates close in your face." Outside the tent, the air was cold. Kieran looked at Elira. "Still want to do this?" he asked. She nodded. "We don't have a choice." Then we ride at dawn. And as the stars appeared above, the camp returned to its usual noise. But somewhere beyond the trees, something dark was moving, growing stronger with every passing hour. The next morning, Kieran and Elira left the camp before sunrise. The sky was still dark, and the road ahead was quiet. They rode on horseback, traveling fast toward the capital. Neither of them spoke much. They both knew what waited for them. There would be harder than any battle. As they rode, Kieran noticed how calm Elira looked. Even though she was going to a place where most would hate her, she showed no fear. Her eyes stayed on the road, but her mind seemed far away. "What are you thinking about?" Kieran asked. "About the past," she said. "And what might happen if we fail." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. They both knew the cost of failure was too high. By midday, they reached a river that marked the edge of the human kingdom's capital lands. Guards stood on the bridge, watching closely. When they saw Elira, they reached for their weapons. "Halt! No elves may pass," one of them shouted. Kieran raised a hand. "I'm Sir Kieran of the Southern Guard. I request entry to the capital on urgent matters." The guard looked unsure. "You're traveling with an elf. She's here as an ally. We need to speak to the king." "Now." The guards hesitated. Then one of them walked off to send word. After a long wait, they were finally allowed to pass, but only under escort. Elira rode silently, ignoring the angry looks from villagers they passed. Children stared in confusion. Adults whispered and pointed. Some even threw small stones, though none of them hit her. Kieran stayed close, his hand never far from his sword. "They don't know you," he said quietly. "They only know old stories." "Fear grows when truth is lost," she replied. "But I didn't come for their kindness. I came to warn them." When they reached the city gates, a group of soldiers met them. The captain stepped forward. "You'll leave your weapons here," he ordered. "The elf walks alone. You wait outside." "No," Kieran said sharply. "We go together." "Those are the rules," the captain snapped. Elira stepped forward. "I'll go. Let him stay here." "I'm not letting you face the king alone," Kieran said. "You must," she said gently. "If they see us both, they'll think it's a trick. But if I speak alone, maybe they'll listen." Kieran looked into her eyes. He didn't want to agree, but she was right. "Fine," he said, "but if you're not out in 1 hour, I'm coming in." Elira gave a small smile, then handed him her sword. "Keep this safe for me." She turned and walked through the gates. The doors closed behind her with a loud thud. Kieran stood outside, watching the walls, his heart heavy with worry. Somewhere inside, Elira was walking into the court of a human king, alone, unarmed, and unwelcome. But she walked without fear, because she carried something stronger than weapons. She carried the truth. Inside the grand hall of the capital, Elira walked slowly, her eyes scanning the room. The walls were decorated with banners of the human kingdom, bright with gold and red. The throne at the far end of the hall glinted in the sunlight coming through the high windows. Guards lined the room, their eyes cold as they watched her. The king sat on his throne, his face unreadable. He was an older man, dressed in rich robes, with a crown on his head that seemed too heavy for him. Beside him stood his advisors, all watching Elira closely. "You're the elf princess." The king's voice was strong but not kind. "I am," she said. Her voice was calm, though inside she felt the weight of every stare on her. "I come with a warning." "A warning?" the king repeated. "About what?" "Dark magic is returning," she said. "The seal that kept it locked away has been broken. The ruins where it was sealed are no longer safe." A murmur ran through the room. The king leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "And why should I believe an elf? You've always been a danger to us." "You've heard the stories, I'm sure," Aelira said, meeting his gaze. "Stories of the old war. But it's not just stories. The magic that was sealed in the ruins has started to rise again. And if we don't stop it, it will destroy both our people." "You think I don't know about magic?" the king sneered. "We've dealt with magic before." "This is different," Aelira said, her voice firm. "This is not just about spells or power. This magic is older than anything we know. It can twist and control the land itself. If we don't act together, it will tear apart everything." The king sat back, his face hardening. "And what do you expect from me, elf? You expect me to send my soldiers to fight some old, forgotten magic?" "Not soldiers," Aelira said quickly. "Wisdom. We need to work together. Humans and elves. There are no more enemies, only allies." The king looked at her for a long moment. The room was quiet, every person watching the silent exchange. Finally, the king spoke, his voice low. "You've been taught to hate us. How can you expect us to trust you?" "Because I know what it means to fight for survival," Aelira said, her eyes never leaving his. "I've seen my people suffer, and I've seen your people suffer too. We are not so different." The king's eyes softened for a moment, but he quickly hardened again. "Your words are good, elf, but I need more than words. Bring me proof, then we will talk." Aelira's heart sank. She had hoped for more. "Proof? What proof could I possibly give you?" "Bring me the source of this dark magic," the king said coldly, "and then we will discuss how to fight it." Aelira felt a pang of frustration, but she nodded. "Very well. I will return with proof." She turned and walked out of the hall, her mind racing. Kieran was waiting outside, his eyes searching for her. "What happened?" he asked. "He wants proof," Aelira said. "He won't help until I bring him the source of the magic." "Then we'll find it," Kieran said, his voice steady. "Together." Aelira nodded. She didn't know how, but she knew one thing. They had no choice but to keep fighting. The next day, Kieran and Aelira stood at the edge of the capital, looking out over the dense forest ahead. The king's refusal had only made their mission clearer. They had to find the source of the dark magic, prove it was real, and return before the king would even consider helping them. But the thought of finding something so dangerous, something that could control the land itself, was a heavy burden. "Where do we start?" Kieran asked, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Aelira stared into the trees, her expression serious. "We return to the ruins. If the magic is waking, it will be strongest there. We need to find the source before it grows too powerful." Kieran nodded, but unease settled in his stomach. He knew the ruins well enough now. The place was not only filled with old magic, but also with danger. And it wasn't just the creatures that haunted it. There was something deeper, something older, that threatened everyone. They mounted their horses and began the journey back. The path was long, but the quiet of the forest gave them little comfort. Every step seemed to draw them deeper into something they couldn't fully understand. The shadows seemed to move at the corner of their vision, and the wind whispered with voices they couldn't make out. "Do you think we can really find it?" Kieran asked, his voice low as they rode side by side. "I don't know," Aelira answered honestly, "but we have to try. If we don't, the king will never listen." The hours passed, and the familiar sight of the ruins finally appeared on the horizon. The place still felt dark and wrong. The air was thick, and even the trees around it seemed to grow twisted and heavy. As they rode closer, the earth beneath their horses' hooves felt colder. They dismounted at the edge of the stone circle. Elira stood quietly for a moment, her hand resting on one of the cracked pillars. The air hummed with the faintest trace of magic. Something was alive here, but it wasn't the kind of life that could be seen. "This is where it began," she said quietly, "and this is where we will end it, if we can." Kieran watched her closely. He could feel the weight of her words, and he knew this wasn't just about magic anymore. It was about survival, for both their people. "We should look for anything that's changed," he suggested. They walked through the ruins, scanning the ground for any signs. The stone circle was still darkened by the blackened marks of old magic. The strange symbols that lined the path were still visible, though faded. But as they walked deeper into the heart of the ruins, something caught Elira's eye. There, half buried in the dirt, was a shard of glass. It shimmered faintly, a strange purple glow radiating from within. She knelt down to pick it up, her fingers trembling slightly. "What is it?" Kieran asked, moving closer. "This," Elira said slowly, "is part of the seal, but it's broken." The shard pulsed in her hand. Kieran could feel its energy, and it made his heart race. "This is the source," Elira whispered, "and it's more dangerous than we thought." Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. They both looked around, senses alert. Something had been disturbed. The magic was waking. The ground shook again, this time harder. Kieran's hand flew to his sword, his eyes scanning the ruins. Elira stood still, holding the shard tightly in her hand. The faint purple glow grew brighter, and the air grew colder. The magic was waking, and they could feel its power in every step they took. "We need to leave now," Kieran said, his voice tight. Elira didn't move. She stared at the shard, her face pale. "It's too late to run. This is what we came for." Suddenly, the stone pillars around them cracked, splitting down the middle. The ruins groaned as if the land itself was in pain. From the cracks, dark shapes began to emerge, shadowy creatures, twisted and more powerful than the ones they had faced before. Their glowing eyes glared at Elira and Kieran, and the air hummed with their unnatural energy. "Stay close," Kieran warned, stepping in front of Elira. His hand gripped his sword tightly, ready to strike. "We can't fight them all," Elira said, her voice tense. "We have to find the source before it spreads." The creatures lunged forward, faster than before. Kieran met the first one with a strong blow, but it only seemed to fade into mist before reappearing behind him. He spun around, eyes wide. "They're not real. They're made of the magic." Elira raised her sword, chanting quietly under her breath. The blade glowed with a soft blue light, and with one quick motion, she slashed through a creature. It screeched before dissolving into smoke, but there were more, dozens of them, swarming from the cracks in the stone. "This is insane," Kieran muttered, slashing at another creature. "We can't win like this." "We don't have to win," Elira replied, her voice sharp. "We need to seal the magic again. If we don't, this will never stop." She looked down at the shard in her hand, and a flicker of determination passed through her eyes. "This is the key. We just need to get to the heart of the ruins." Kieran nodded. "Then let's move." They pushed through the creatures, cutting through the shadows as they moved toward the center of the stone circle. The magic in the air thickened, pushing against them, but Elira held the shard close to her chest, her focus unshaken. As they reached the center of the circle, the ground cracked open. A dark vortex began to form, swirling with dark energy. From it, a figure emerged, tall and cloaked in shadows. Its face was hidden, but its presence was suffocating. "This is it," Elira whispered. "The source." The figure raised its hand, and the ground trembled again. The air was filled with a cold, empty laughter. Kieran stepped forward, sword raised. "We're not afraid of you." But the figure only smiled, its voice like a whisper in their minds. "You are too late." Elira raised the shard. We will see about that. The battle was only beginning. The figure in the shadows raised its hand, and the air around them seemed to freeze. Kieran gripped his sword tightly, stepping forward to shield Illyra. The dark figure's presence was overwhelming, like a storm gathering around them. "You cannot stop what has already begun," the figure said, its voice echoing in their minds. "The seal is broken. The world will fall into darkness." Illyra stood tall, holding the shard in her hand. "We're not here to listen to your words," she said, her voice steady. "We're here to stop you." The figure's eyes, glowing with an unnatural light, turned toward her. "You think you can defeat me with a broken shard? It is already too late." The ground beneath them trembled again, and the shadows around them thickened, closing in like a wave. Creatures began to materialize from the darkness, their eyes fixed on Illyra and Kieran. But they didn't stop. They couldn't stop. "We've faced worse," Kieran said, his voice low. "We'll keep fighting." Illyra nodded. She stepped forward, holding the shard high. As she did, a brilliant blue light began to glow from within it. The shadows hissed and recoiled as if afraid. The figure seemed to pause, watching her carefully. "Do you really think you can control the magic?" it asked, amusement in its voice. "I don't need to control it," Illyra said. "I just need to seal it away again." With a sharp motion, she slammed the shard into the ground at the center of the ruins. A flash of light exploded from it, sending a wave of energy rippling through the stone circle. The ground cracked, and the air filled with a loud, almost deafening sound, like the magic was fighting back. The creatures around them shrieked and tried to flee, but the light grew brighter, pushing them back. The figure roared in anger, raising its hands to try and stop the light. "You are a fool. This magic is not yours to control." But Illyra's focus didn't waver. She closed her eyes and whispered the ancient words she had been taught, words of power and protection. The light from the shard grew stronger, brighter, until it was blinding. Kieran shielded his eyes, but he could still hear the figure's screams as the magic was sealed away, contained once more. The shadows that had surrounded them began to fade, disappearing into the cracks in the ground. The creatures vanished, leaving only silence behind. Illyra dropped to her knees, exhausted. The shard had lost its glow, now nothing more than a dull piece of glass. Kieran rushed to her side, helping her up. "You did it," he said, his voice full of relief. Illyra nodded weakly. "We did it." They looked around at the ruins. The darkness had lifted, but the damage was done. The magic was sealed again, but they knew it wouldn't stay that way forever. There would always be threats, always enemies, but they had proven that together they could face anything. Kieran took Illyra's hand, pulling her to her feet. "Let's go home." Illyra looked at him, a small smile on her face. Together. They turned and walked away from the ruins, the weight of their victory still sinking in. There would be more battles to fight, but for now, they had won, and that was enough.